95% of people will stay broke for most of their lives. Not because they are lazy, not because they are unintelligent, but because nobody ever taught them the rules of a game they are forced to play every single day. Think about your own life. You wake up early. You go to work. You try to save a little money. You do everything you were told was responsible. You work hard. You stay out of trouble. You follow the path. And yet what happens at the end of every month? The money is gone. And somehow you are still standing in the exact same place, year after year. Why? Because hard work was never the secret, if hard work were the answer. The people who work the hardest would already be the richest people alive, but they are not. The truth is colder than that. You are not stuck because you lack effort. You are stuck because you are playing a game without understanding the rules. Meanwhile, there are people who have known those rules for a very long time, more than 500 years ago. A man named Machiavelli wrote about power control and human nature. Many people called his ideas ruthless. Some called them dangerous. But there is something interesting about that. The wealthy never stopped using them. They simply stopped talking about them. Because once you understand how power works, you begin to understand how money works. And once you understand how money works, you begin to see the game hiding behind the curtain. In the next few minutes, you will discover why so many people spend their entire lives working hard and still never move forward. More importantly, you will begin to understand the invisible rules that quietly decide who rises and who remains trapped. Some of those rules may challenge everything you have ever been taught, but that is exactly why you need to hear them. Because once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. You stop reacting to life. You start seeing the board. And once you can see the board, you can finally begin to play. So let's start with the truth that most people do not want to hear. The real reason so many people remain broke. It is because almost everything they were taught about money was missing a crucial piece. Think back to when you were young. You were told to study hard, get good grades, find a secure job, and someday everything would work out. Sound familiar? Now look around. Is that really how the world works? Or is it simply a story repeated so many times that people mistake it for reality? Because reality tells a different story. Someone else decides what your time is worth. Someone else decides whether you earn $10 an hour or $100. And no matter how hard you work, the final number is rarely in your hands. Then they tell you to put your money in the bank because it is safe. But there is one detail that almost nobody mentions. If inflation averages around 3% per year, the purchasing power of that money can lose nearly half its value in roughly 20 years. You did not spend it. You did not lose it. Yet its value quietly disappears over time. Meanwhile, the financial system continues using that same money to generate more wealth. Then one day you want to feel a little more successful. A newer phone appears. A better car appears. Something that makes you feel as if you are moving up in the world. And if you cannot afford it, credit is waiting. Imagine carrying a $1,000 balance on a credit card charging around 20% interest. That balance does not stay where it is. It grows, month after month, year after year, until one day you realize you are working to pay for things you barely remember buying. Do you see the pattern? On one side, there is your paycheck. On the other side, there is inflation, interest, consumer spending, and little by little, the distance between you and financial freedom keeps growing. But here is the part that changes everything. A game can be learned. The moment you see the rules, You stop reacting out of fear, and you begin making moves with purpose, because if you want to play like the wealthy, you must first learn to think like them. And that brings us to the second rule. So if hard work alone was never enough, what actually separates the wealthy from everyone else? This is where your thinking begins to change. More than 500 years ago, Machiavelli wrote a book called The Prince. Many people still call it dark. Some even call it cruel. But if you read it carefully, you notice something. It is not really a book about evil. It is a book about reality. Machiavelli did not describe the world as we wish it were: fair, honest, rewarding. He described the world as it actually is, and that is the first thing you must accept. The world is not fair. Hard work is not always rewarded. People do not always tell you the truth. Most people are acting in their own self-interest, protecting their own money, protecting their own position, protecting their own power. That is not pessimism. It is clarity. And clarity is where wealth begins. So how do you think like Machiavelli when it comes to money? It starts with 3 simple shifts. First, stop seeing money as paper. Money is a tool, a weapon, and a shield. With it, you create freedom and opportunity. Without it, you become dependent on other people. And dependence always has a cost. Second, learn to see people clearly. Most people listen to words. Strategic people watch actions, because actions reveal incentives, and incentives reveal the truth. What people do will always tell you more than what they say. Third, train yourself to see opportunity where others only see fear. Think about the financial crisis of 2008. While millions of people were panicking and selling everything, a small group quietly bought stocks and real estate at discounted prices. A few years later, many of those assets multiplied in value. Same event. 2 completely different outcomes. The crowd saw fear. The strategist saw opportunity. Now let me be clear. Thinking like Machiavelli does not mean lying. It does not mean cheating. And it does not mean becoming cold. It simply means being strategic instead of naive. It means seeing the world clearly before making your move. Because the moment you make that shift, you stop behaving like a victim of the system, and you start thinking like a player inside it. But thinking differently is only the beginning. The next rule is where strategy becomes action. Because if you cannot control your own money, someone else will. And that brings us to the third rule. Thinking like Machiavelli means nothing if you cannot control what is right in front of you, and nothing is closer to you than your own money. Machiavelli once wrote, "Good that a ruler must control his territory, because if he does not, someone else will. Your territory is your money, and if you do not control it, someone else will." That is exactly what happens to most people. Their money is controlled by landlords, by banks, by subscriptions they barely use, by companies that quietly take a little more every single month. Think about what happens every time you get paid. For a brief moment, you feel powerful. You feel secure. You feel in control. Then the money starts leaving. Rent, bills, food, subscriptions, small purchases you barely remember making. Within days, most of it is gone, and before long you are waiting for the next paycheck to arrive. The worst part. Most people have no idea where their money actually went. They do not track it. They do not measure it. They simply react. They spend when something comes up, and hope everything somehow works out. But hope is not a strategy. The wealthy play a completely different game. They control the flow. They know exactly how much money is coming in, and they know exactly where every dollar is going. Because to them, money is not just paper. It is not just numbers on a screen. Every dollar is a soldier, and every soldier has a mission. Here is where most people lose the war. They send their soldiers into battles that do not matter. Impulse purchases, expensive gadgets, things bought to impress people they do not even like. And once those soldiers leave, they never return. The wealthy think differently. They send their soldiers into productive battles, a new skill that increases income, an investment that grows over time, an asset that continues generating money long after the purchase is made. Their soldiers leave, but they come back, and when they return, they bring reinforcements. That is the difference. Poor people spend their money. The wealthy deploy it. So how do you take back control? Start with 3 simple steps. First, track every dollar for the next month, not to judge yourself, not to feel guilty, but to see the truth. Second, cut the battles that do not matter. Most people are losing money in places they barely notice. Third, pay yourself first. Before you pay anyone else, before you buy anything else, move at least 10 to 20% of every paycheck into savings or investments. Treat your future like the most important bill you have. Because when you do that, your money stops disappearing and starts working for you. You are no longer defending your territory. You are expanding it. But controlling your money is only half the game. The next rule determines how boldly you are willing to use it. And that brings us to the 4th rule. Once your money is under control, you face a question that quietly determines your financial future. How boldly are you willing to act? This is the 4th rule, and it separates the people who stay safe and broke from the people who actually grow. Machiavelli once wrote that fortune favors the bold. In other words, opportunity rarely belongs to those who wait. It belongs to those who are willing to move, even when the outcome is uncertain. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid risk. They are afraid of losing money, afraid of making mistakes, afraid of looking foolish. So they choose the safest path every time. They leave their money sitting in a savings account. They stay in jobs they no longer enjoy. They postpone opportunities, and they tell themselves they will act later. But later rarely comes. Year after year, nothing changes, because avoiding risk feels safe. But what most people never realize is this: avoiding risk is a risk. Every year your money sits idle. Inflation continues to work against you. Every year you delay learning new skills. Someone else moves ahead. Every year you wait for the perfect moment. Opportunity passes to someone willing to act. The wealthy see risk differently. They do not run from it, and they do not blindly chase it. They manage it. They study. They research. They ask questions. They understand what they could lose before they ever make a move. And once the odds make sense, they act. While everyone else hesitates, think about it this way. Imagine investing just $200 every month. If that money simply sits there, after 30 years, you would have $72,000, but invested at an average return of 8% per year. That same $200 a month could grow to nearly $300,000. Same money, same effort, completely different outcome. That is the power of taking a calculated risk instead of hiding from uncertainty. Now let me be clear. Mastering risk does not mean every decision will work. Some investments will fail. Some opportunities will disappoint you. Some plans will not go the way you expected. That is part of the game. Every successful person you admire has lost money somewhere. made mistakes somewhere, failed somewhere. The difference is that they do not treat failure as a reason to quit. They treat it as information, as feedback, as education. They learn, they adjust, and then they move forward again. Because every setback teaches something valuable to the person willing to pay attention. So if you want to start applying this rule, start small. Take risks that cannot destroy you. Learn before you act. Understand the downside. And when the potential reward is greater than the potential loss, have the courage to move. Because wealth is not built by waiting for certainty. It is built by taking intelligent action in an uncertain world. But there is one type of risk that traps more people than almost any bad investment ever could. And learning to control it is the next rule. Debt. And that brings us to the fifth rule. The fifth rule can either accelerate your freedom or quietly destroy it. And the difference comes down to one word: debt. Most people hear that word and immediately think something negative, and sometimes they are right. Because debt has trapped more people than almost any financial mistake. But debt itself is not the real problem. Dependence is. More than 500 years ago, Machiavelli warned that a ruler should never become too dependent on others, because dependence creates weakness. And weakness eventually costs you freedom. The same principle applies to money. The moment you owe more than you can control, you stop working for your future and start working for your past. That is the trap millions of people fall into, without even realizing it. They borrow money to consume, to buy things that lose value the moment they own them. A newer car, a bigger television, a luxury vacation, the latest phone. Things that create excitement today, but create payments tomorrow. Think about a brand new car. The moment it leaves the dealership, it can lose around 20% of its value. You borrowed money, you pay interest, and the asset itself becomes less valuable every day. You are moving backward from the moment you buy it. The same thing happens with countless consumer purchases. People finance lifestyles they cannot afford. Then spend years paying for moments that lasted only weeks. The wealthy approach debt differently. They do not see debt as a source of consumption. They see it as a tool that must produce a return. They borrow money to acquire assets, to start businesses, to purchase investments, to buy things that put money back into their pockets. For them, borrowed money has a mission. It must bring back more than it costs. That is the entire difference. One person borrows to consume. The other borrows to produce. One becomes more dependent. The other becomes more powerful. So before you ever take on debt, ask yourself one simple question. Will this debt make me richer or poorer? That single question can prevent years of financial pain. If the debt creates income, builds an asset, or increases your future earning power, it may be a useful tool. But if it only takes money out of your pocket, it is probably a trap, no matter how attractive it looks today. And if you are already carrying debt, do not ignore it. Face it. Write down every balance, every payment, every interest rate. Know exactly what you owe. Then focus on eliminating the most expensive debt first, because that is where the damage is happening fastest. And make a decision. From this point forward, only use debt when it helps build your future, not when it decorates your present. Master this rule, and debt stops controlling you. It becomes another tool in your hands. But once your money has direction, and your debt has purpose, something else starts to matter. The way the world sees you. Because perception creates opportunity. And that brings us to the sixth rule. This brings us to the sixth rule, and it is one of Machiavelli's most powerful ideas. He believed that a ruler must appear strong, even during moments of weakness, because people are naturally drawn to strength, and they quietly move away from weakness. The same principle applies to money. The way you carry yourself shapes how the world responds to you, and that response often determines which opportunities ever reach your door. Most people never realize this. Their financial insecurity is visible long before they speak about it. They panic when unexpected expenses appear. They constantly worry out loud about money. They hesitate every time an opportunity presents itself. Fear controls their decisions, and the world notices. Employers notice, clients notice, business partners notice, investors notice. People naturally trust confidence, and they naturally avoid uncertainty. That does not mean confidence guarantees success, but it does increase the opportunities available to you. The wealthy understand this instinctively. They may not always have millions in the bank. They may face setbacks. They may experience losses, but they rarely project panic. They remain calm. They remain disciplined. They remain in control. And because they appear strong, people trust them with bigger opportunities. People want to work with them, partner with them, invest in them. This is not luck. It is perception. Imagine two people presenting the exact same idea. One appears calm and certain. The other appears nervous and desperate. Who receives the opportunity? Who earns the trust? In most cases, the answer is obvious, because people respond to what they see, not necessarily to what is true. If you constantly appear desperate, people will treat you as desperate. If you constantly appear uncertain, people will treat you as uncertain. But if you appear calm, disciplined, and in control, people begin to trust your decisions. Now let me be very clear. This is where many people misunderstand the lesson. Appearing strong does not mean looking rich. It does not mean buying expensive clothes, driving luxury cars, or showing off things you cannot afford. That is not strength. That is insecurity wearing an expensive costume. Machiavelli would never confuse appearance with power. Real financial strength is not about displaying wealth. It is about displaying control. Control over your emotions. Control over your decisions. Control over your money. So how do you apply this first? Keep your financial situation private. Whether you are struggling, saving, or rebuilding. The world does not need to know every detail. What people should see is discipline, not drama. Second, stop reacting emotionally to pressure. When problems appear, slow down. Stay calm, because calmness signals control. Third, carry yourself with certainty. Speak clearly. Make decisions deliberately. And stop apologizing for having standards, even if you are starting with very little. Show the world that you are fully in command of that little. Because something interesting happens over time. The strength you project slowly becomes the strength you possess. People begin trusting you. Opportunities begin finding you. And eventually, your reality starts catching up to your posture. But there is a limit to how far any person can go alone. No matter how disciplined, no matter how confident, no matter how capable. And that is exactly what the next rule is about. Because wealth is rarely built in isolation. It is built through people. And that brings us to the seventh rule. The seventh rule is the one that lone wolves ignore, and it quietly costs them everything. Machiavelli understood that even the strongest ruler cannot survive alone. No leader can face every challenge alone. No leader can win every battle alone. They need allies, and the same is true for you. Real wealth is rarely built in isolation. It is built through people. But this is where many people get stuck. They try to do everything themselves. They are too proud to ask for help, or too afraid to trust anyone. So they carry every problem on their own shoulders. And that becomes their limitation. Because one person only has so many hours in a day. One person can only learn so much through experience. One person can only see so much. The wealthy think differently. They understand that money is not just about working harder. It is about multiplying yourself through other people. That is why they build strong relationships. A mentor can save you years of mistakes. A lesson that took someone 20 years to learn can be passed to you in a few minutes. A strong partner can bring skills, resources, and opportunities that you do not have on your own. And a strong community can provide ideas, accountability, and support when your own motivation begins to fade. This is why people say, your network is your net worth. Because almost every great fortune was built through relationships. Behind every successful business, there were mentors, partners, investors, and connections. No billionaire built everything alone. They simply understood that collaboration creates leverage. It allows you to achieve in a few years what might otherwise take decades. So how do you apply this rule? First, find mentors who have already achieved what you want. Learn from their mistakes instead of repeating them. Second, build real partnerships. Work with people whose strengths complement your weaknesses, and always provide value in return. Third, choose your circle carefully. Spend more time with people who push you to grow, and less time with people who pull you backward. Remember, building alliances is not dependence, it is leverage. It is choosing to win together instead of struggling alone. But the moment you start building relationships, a new challenge appears. Some people will help you, and some people will try to use you. Which is exactly why the next rule matters. And that brings us to the 8th rule. The 8th rule is where you stop being an easy target. Machiavelli asked a famous question. Is it better to be loved or feared? His answer was simple. If you cannot be both, it is safer to be feared. In money, that does not mean making people afraid of you. It means commanding respect, because people are constantly watching how you handle money, and they adjust how they treat you accordingly. If you appear careless, they bring you bad deals. If you appear desperate, they pressure you. If you appear weak, they assume you can be manipulated. Weak money habits do not just cost you money, they invite exploitation. The wealthy understand this. They are calm, disciplined, difficult to influence, and because of that, people respect their time, their decisions, and their money. This is the real meaning of power, not intimidation. Respect, and respect often begins with one simple word. No. No to the $400 dinner you cannot justify. No to the investment that does not make sense. No to the pressure to spend money just to fit in. At first, people may question you. They may mock you. They may try to persuade you. But eventually, they learn something. You cannot be moved by pressure. And that earns respect. Every time you say no to a bad decision, you protect your future. Every time you refuse a bad deal, you strengthen your position. Every time you reject unnecessary spending, you keep control. Because kindness alone will not protect you. People can like you, and still take advantage of you. Respect is what protects your boundaries. So how do you apply this rule first? Set clear standards for your money, and never apologize for them. Second, learn to say no without guilt. A calm, firm no is one of the most powerful financial tools you will ever have. Third, never make financial decisions under pressure. Not from urgency, not from guilt, not from emotion. Take your time. Think clearly. Decide deliberately. Let people see that you cannot be rushed, you cannot be pressured, and you cannot be manipulated. Because when people respect your boundaries, they begin respecting your money. And when they respect your money, better opportunities begin to appear. But every rule so far has been leading to one final battlefield, the most important one of all, the battlefield inside your own mind. And that brings us to the 9th rule. And now we arrive at the 9th rule, the one I promised would change everything, because every rule you have heard so far, controlling your money, managing risk, using debt, building alliances, commanding respect, all of it comes down to one thing: your mind. Master your mind, and you master the game. Machiavelli understood something most people never do. Real power begins in the mind, and the same is true for wealth. There are two mindsets that shape your future: the broke mindset and the rich mindset. The broke mindset sees an opportunity and immediately says, "I can't afford it." It sees a problem and feels helpless. It believes the only answer is to work harder. It reacts to circumstances, and it is quietly controlled by fear. The rich mindset asks a different question. Not, "I can't afford it," but "How can I afford it?" That single question changes everything, because it turns a limitation into a problem to solve. The rich mindset looks for leverage, systems, assets, opportunities. It does not just chase money, it builds things that produce money. Imagine two people earning the exact same salary. The first spends everything and waits for someday. The second controls every dollar, invests consistently, and builds patiently. 10 years later, they are living completely different lives. The difference was never the income. It was the mindset behind the income. That is the truth most people never hear. Your bank account is often a reflection of your thinking. If you think small, you stay small. If you live in fear, fear will make your decisions for you. But if you train yourself to see opportunities where others see obstacles, you slowly rise above the crowd. So here is the final lesson. Guard your mind like your most valuable asset. Feed it knowledge. Challenge the beliefs that keep you stuck. And every time you face a financial problem, stop asking, "Can I?" Start asking, "How can I?" Because that one question repeated over years can completely change your life. Master your money and you change your bank account. Master your mind and you change your destiny. And that was always the rule that mattered most.